In this video, I'm going to show you a few of the traps that you can fall into. Sometimes you have problems making a command do what you want it to do. And 9 times out of 10, that's because the system doesn't understand or is missing some of the information that it requires. So I'm going to look at the mirror, the fillet, the chamfer. We're going to talk a little bit about the number lock key if you have a separate keypad for numbers. We're going to talk about drawing numerous things in the wrong layer and how to fix that. We'll look at a cluttered drawing and we'll look at doing some dimensions that are tidy. So I'm going to choose the mirror command. I can either click up here, and a good thing to do is to hold still with the mouse and hover for a while, because you get a great explanation as how you're supposed to use this command. So you either click there or type mirror. The first thing it wants me to do is select objects. So I'm going to mirror all of this below that center line. So I click to select, and you can see that the cursor has changed into a wee square, and you've got some grey text or some text on a grey background that says select objects. Now you may feel that you've already done that, but the system expects you to tell it that you're finished choosing objects. So you can do that by pressing enter. Now it wants you to specify the first point of a mirror line. So if I want to generate the mirror image of this below that line, then I'm going to choose 2 points on that line as my mirror point. So I'm going to click on endpoint, and I'm going to click over here on the other end. If you want to get rid of the source object, you naturally have to click yes. It seems now in this version of AutoCAD that the option no, don't erase the source object is the default setting. On earlier versions, if you just pressed enter at that stage, the command would have failed. But I'm going to press no because I want to keep both objects. And you see that command has successfully worked. Now we'll have a look at filleting. Now there's an icon up here with a drop down beside it, and if I pull the drop down, I can choose the fillet command, and you can see that when it pops up, it's a tool that allows you to take a corner and apply a radius to it. Instead of having a right angled corner, you can have a corner based on the quadrant of a circle. So I'll choose the command, and this is an interesting command, and this is one that students struggle with. If you look again at the cursor, you can see this time that you have the words select the first object or, and beside or there's a tiny little box, a white box with an arrow in it. Now that arrow is directing you down to this ribbon where there are different things for you to choose. Now, if I want a radius on this corner, it would make sense to know what the radius is going to be. So I'm going to click R for radius, or you can just type R and press enter. It says now to specify the radius. So I'll say 6, and we'll press enter. And then it wants you to select an object. So we'll radius this corner here. So I'm going to click on that first line, and then it automatically says select the second object. So I'm going to click that line, and you can see if I choose my utilities, I go to measure, and I go to radius, if I click on that radius, it tells me that that is a radius of 6. Now I'm going to measure the edge of this line again and show you something that can go wrong. So distance, and I want to measure from this point to this point, and I've got a distance of 27.25 millimeters. Let's go into fillet command again. This time I'm going to give it a radius of 40. Now if I select the first object, it'll take it. If I select the second object, I'm getting an error. It's important to read what it says in the little box. Fillet radius is too large, and it's because this line isn't long enough to allow me to have a radius of 40. So that's one thing to avoid. The same thing can happen with the chamfer command. So we'll just zoom in a little bit to this corner. Now, when I select a chamfer, it's going to ask you to either input a distance or an angle. So commonly I use distance. Now let's say the drawing is a chamfer of 45 degrees. That would be 3 millimeters in from one side, for example, and 3 millimeters in from the other side. So I select one line and a second line, and then it's cut off 3 millimeters of the top edge, it's cut off 3 millimeters of this edge, and it's applied the chamfer. Now, because those two distances were set to the same amount, the chamfer will be a 45-degree chamfer. And I'll just grab another different coloured line here from the menu, and we'll zoom in slightly more, and I'll prove it to you. Line command. Line command again. Now if I go to my utilities, measure, this time I want to measure an angle, and I'm going to choose a line and choose this line, and you see that that angle is 45 degrees. The only reason that can be 45 degrees is because we trimmed off 3 mil here and 3 mil here. If those two distances are different, then this line can never be 45 degrees. So that's an interesting command. Now, we've done mirrors, fillets and chamfers. Number lock. If you have a standalone keyboard and you're not using a laptop, you've got like a regular keyboard that plugs in USB, most of the time it has a keypad off to the right hand side, and that keypad is simply for numbers. Now if I try to draw a line on my laptop, I can place somewhere and I can tell the system that I want that line to be 50 millimeters long, and I can press enter and I'll get a line that's 50 millimeters long. If you're using that keypad on the right hand side of your keyboard and you don't have the numbers lock button pressed in so that the light illuminates, you won't be able to type in the distance or the angle depending on what you're trying to do. So in that case, you've got two choices. You either switch it on or you use the numbers that appear directly above the letters on your keypad. So that's something that's quite frustrating for students. And they're usually busy looking at the keys to see what to type in, and then they hit enter to accept that value. But because they're looking at the keyboard, they don't see that the numbers are not appearing in the little blue box here. Avoid that if you can. So what happens when my drawing becomes too cluttered? Well, one way to clutter a drawing is by putting a heap of dimensions into it. So I'm just going to randomly put a lot of dimensions here. I'm not going to do them properly. I'm just going to apply them anywhere I like, just to make a mess. Now you can see this drawing is quite cluttered now, and perhaps I need to look at some detail, but it's obscured by all these dimensions. So what I can do is I can go in to the layers menu, and you can actually turn off the complete layer, and it'll ask you if you really want to do it, so you say yes. Now I had some text drawn in dimension layer just to make it purple, so that's then gone. So now you could select things without having to select any dimensions that were sitting around about here, and you could either delete these or change them. So I'm going to turn on the dimensions again. And now I'm going to get rid of them all because they're not done properly. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of all this first. And that. And now I'm going to turn off some of the other layers. I'm going to turn off the drawing sheet. And I'll turn off hidden details, center lines, and the zero layer. So now I can just highlight all my dimensions, get rid of them. So they are deleted. And then when I go back, I can turn on my layers. And everything's ready for me to dimension them properly. So let's have a look about how we would like to dimension this object. I won't put them all in, but I'll show you a couple of things on how to make your dimensions look nice and tidy. So a linear dimension, if you start from the extreme side of an object and place a dimension to the other extent and place that one quite high, then you can put other dimensions underneath from point to point, and that looks particularly neat. But if you want to make them line up, then if I hover over here, these two dimensions are level. I can add another one here, like so. It's always good to have levels of dimensions in a line like this. It looks better on the page. And I think that'll do for this video.